underestimate the majesty of this place and to see buildings from all different periods. This really is like a history book of Egypt told through beautiful stone temples.
Deep inside one of Egypt's most breathtaking temples, carved into stone walls thousands of years ago, sits something that should not exist. Experts remain baffled by what appears to be ancient electricity lamps depicted in stunning detail, complete with what looks like cables, sockets, and glowing filaments.
It looks like two light bulbs with some kind of image of electricity, even a cable coming off both ends, which is also depicted by a flower.
The mystery of this lost technology continues to divide archaeologists and engineers alike. Some see proof of advanced knowledge that vanished without a trace. Others see religious symbolism misinterpreted through modern eyes. But everyone agrees on one thing: what's carved into these walls defies easy explanation. The carving that looks like a light bulb. Hidden within the temple of Hathor at Dendera, there are 3 stone reliefs that show something absolutely extraordinary. At first glance, these carvings look exactly like modern electrical equipment. We're talking about what appears to be a large glass bulb with a lotus-shaped socket at one end, a thick cable running underneath, and inside the bulb, a snake-like filament that winds through the entire structure. This image is causing a serious debate in the archaeological community. On one side, you have Egyptologists who see religious symbolism. On the other hand, electrical engineers who see technology. The Dendera temple itself dates back over 2,000 years, yet these reliefs suggest the ancient Egyptians might have understood principles of electricity that we only rediscovered in the modern era. The most detailed relief shows a priest holding up this lamp-like object while smaller figures direct it upward. There's a jed pillar with 2 arms that appear connected to the snake inside the bulb. Even more puzzling, a baboon stands in front of the entire scene, gripping 2 knives. Every element seems deliberately placed, as if the artist wanted to document an actual device rather than create symbolic art. What makes this discovery so captivating is its precision, the proportions, the components, the way everything connects. It all follows a logical structure that matches electrical equipment far too closely to be coincidental. But here's where the mystery deepens. If this really depicts ancient electricity, where are the power sources? Where are the wires leading to other rooms? And why would such revolutionary technology appear in only one location? The engineer who saw the impossible. The Dendera light first caught serious attention when a Norwegian electrical engineer examined the reliefs and made a shocking claim. He insisted these weren't religious symbols at all. They were technical diagrams of working electrical lamps. His observations sparked several speculations that continue burning today. Austrian authors Peter Krasse and Rainer Habeck took this theory global when they published their groundbreaking book about high technology and electricity in ancient Egypt. They weren't just making wild guesses. They brought in another electrical engineer named W. Garn to put the hypothesis to the test. Garn didn't just theorize, he built an actual working model based on the Dendera reliefs. Here's what Garn discovered that left experts stunned. When you evacuate a glass bulb with 2 metal parts reaching inside and reduce the pressure to about 40 millimeters of mercury, something remarkable happens. A snake-like light filament appears meandering from one metal part to the other. Reduce the pressure further, and the light filament expands until it fills the entire bulb. According to Garn, this matches exactly what we see depicted in the subterranean chambers of the Hathor sanctuary. The experiment wasn't conducted in some makeshift laboratory. Garn followed rigorous engineering principles to test whether the ancient design could function as electrical equipment. His working model demonstrated that at specific pressure levels, the visual effect inside the evacuated bulb replicated the snake-like form carved into the Dendera stone. The fact that adjusting the vacuum pressure changed the filament's appearance exactly as depicted in different variations of the relief added another layer of intrigue to his findings. The implications are staggering. If Garn's reconstruction works, and it does, then the ancient Egyptians somehow understood vacuum technology, electrical discharge, and the behavior of ionized gases inside sealed containers. These are concepts that didn't enter mainstream science until the 19th century. The Dendera reliefs would represent a technological sophistication that rewrites everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations. But there's a problem that keeps nagging at researchers. If the Egyptians possessed this knowledge, why don't we see evidence of it anywhere else? No copper wiring has been found. No glass manufacturing techniques advanced enough to create vacuum-sealed bulbs. No power generation systems. The Dendera light stands alone, unexplained and impossible according to conventional history. That is, until you start decoding the symbols under a different light, pun intended, and a whole new story comes out. Decoding the ancient symbols. Here's something crucial that often gets overlooked in this debate. The ancient Egyptians didn't just carve pictures. They added detailed inscriptions explaining what each image represented. And these texts tell a very different story from the electrical hypothesis. Dr. Wolfgang Waitkus, an Egyptologist who spent years translating these inscriptions, found references to gods, creation myths, and cosmic symbolism. The translation specifically identifies the central figure as Harsamtus, also known as Horus the Unifier of Two Lands, described as the great god who dwells in Dendera. The text explains that he rises from the lotus flower as a living Ba, with his perfection elevated by sacred images of his Ka. His body is carried by the Etched pillar on the day barge, with various divine figures worshipping his form. These aren't vague religious platitudes. They're precise theological descriptions using established Egyptian religious terminology that appears throughout other temples and papyri. When you understand Egyptian mythology, the symbols start making sense in an entirely different way. The lotus flower wasn't a socket. It represented the first thing to emerge from the infinite primordial sea of none, before creation itself. Ancient myths describe this lotus giving birth to the sun god Atum-Ra. The snake wasn't a filament, but rather Atum-Ra himself, often depicted as a serpent within a bubble to represent the emergence of the universe from nothingness. Egyptian creation mythology consistently portrays the lotus flower in this lamp-like shape across multiple temple complexes and time periods. The bubble or essence surrounding the snake appears in later depictions as a standard way to illustrate Atum-Ra's emergence. These weren't unique artistic choices made at Dendera. They followed established iconographic conventions that Egyptian priests and artists used for centuries to communicate specific theological concepts. The Etched pillar, which some interpret as an electrical component, actually symbolizes Osiris and concepts of power, endurance, and stability in Egyptian culture. During agricultural ceremonies, pharaohs would perform the raising the Etched ritual with ropes and priests, representing Osiris's triumph and the strength of the monarch. This happened during a 17-day festival celebrating rebirth and renewal. Even the baboon holding knives fits perfectly into Egyptian religious iconography. Baboons were associated with Thoth, god of knowledge and magic, often depicted in scenes involving cosmic creation and the rising sun. The knives reference the Sea of the Two Knives, another name for the primordial waters of Nun. So we have two competing interpretations of the same image. One sees advanced technology. The other sees elaborate religious symbolism. Both explanations are internally consistent. Both seem to account for what's depicted. The question becomes, which interpretation fits the broader context of ancient Egypt? The missing evidence problem. Right now, there's a glaring absence that undermines the electrical lamp theory. If ancient Egyptians truly possessed electric lighting, we should find supporting evidence throughout Egypt. Yet archaeologists have excavated thousands of sites over more than a century, and not a single unambiguous electrical artifact has ever been discovered. No light bulbs, no copper wiring beyond simple jewelry and tools, no transformers, generators, or power distribution systems, no glass manufacturing facilities capable of producing the precision vessels required for vacuum technology. The archaeological record is remarkably complete in many ways, yet completely silent on electrical engineering. Here's another puzzle that supporters of the lost technology theory struggle to explain. There are no historical texts discussing electricity or artificial lighting in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians were meticulous record keepers who documented everything from medical procedures to architectural techniques to religious rituals. They left behind countless papyri describing daily life, construction methods, and scientific knowledge. Yet nowhere do we find any mention of electrical lighting or the principles behind it. The silence in the historical record becomes even more problematic when you consider how thoroughly the Egyptians documented their other achievements. We have detailed accounts of pyramid construction logistics, medical treatments for specific ailments, mathematical calculations for land surveying, and even recipes for cosmetics and perfumes. If they possessed revolutionary lighting technology that functioned in their temples and sacred spaces, the complete absence of any textual reference becomes nearly impossible to explain away. Compare this to what we do find. Egyptian texts explain how they carved stone, how they made bronze tools, and how they organized labor forces. They documented the obvious and the mundane alongside the sacred and the sophisticated. If they had revolutionary lighting technology, why maintain absolute silence about it? The absence of soot deposits in some tombs has been cited as evidence for electric lighting. After all, oil lamps would leave carbon residue on ceilings and walls. But this argument falls apart under scrutiny. Many tombs do show soot deposits. Those without soot can be explained by reflected sunlight through carefully positioned mirrors and shafts, a technique the Egyptians definitely mastered. Some chambers may have been painted after construction rather than during it. Critics of the electrical theory point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The burden of proof lies with those proposing that ancient Egyptians possessed technology far beyond anything else in their civilization. A single ambiguous relief, no matter how compelling it appears, cannot overturn the overwhelming archaeological consensus built on decades of physical evidence and textual analysis. And yet some people insist on this interpretation, and the evidence they bring in favor might be too compelling to ignore. The secret ceremony defense. Supporters of the ancient electricity theory have developed a clever response to the missing evidence problem. They propose that electrical lighting wasn't a common technology available to everyone. Instead, it belonged to secret rituals performed exclusively by high priests during sacred ceremonies near New Year celebrations. According to this interpretation, the Dendera light depicts equipment used in restricted religious contexts that ordinary Egyptians never witnessed. The priests guarded this knowledge jealously, passing it down through carefully controlled initiation ceremonies. The technology itself would have been considered too sacred or powerful for everyday use. This hypothesis explains why we don't find electrical equipment scattered throughout Egypt. The artifacts would have been limited to temples, hidden in sealed chambers, or possibly destroyed after each ritual use. The theory suggests that what we're seeing at Dendera is documentation of a secret practice rather than common technology. There's something seductive about this explanation. It preserves the electrical interpretation while accounting for the lack of physical evidence. It also fits certain patterns in ancient Egyptian religion, where specific rituals and knowledge were indeed restricted to priestly classes. The concept of hidden wisdom protected by religious authorities has precedent in Egyptian culture. But let's examine the problems with this defense. First, keeping such revolutionary technology secret for thousands of years across multiple dynasties seems implausible. Secrets leak, empires fall, knowledge spreads, yet we find zero evidence of this electrical knowledge spreading to other cultures that interacted with Egypt, despite extensive trade and conquest throughout the ancient world. Second, if the technology was so secret, why carve explicit depictions of it on temple walls where anyone could see them? The Dendera reliefs aren't hidden in sealed chambers accessible only to high priests. They're in areas accessible to visitors. Carving detailed technical diagrams in semi-public spaces contradicts the notion of jealously guarded secrets. Third, the ritual destruction explanation is convenient but unfalsifiable. You can claim anything existed if you also claim it was systematically destroyed. This reasoning could justify any theory regardless of supporting evidence. It's a logical trap that removes the possibility of proving or disproving the claim. The secret ceremony defense reveals something important about how we approach ancient mysteries. When faced with evidence that doesn't fit our preferred interpretation, we can either revise our interpretation or create elaborate explanations for why the evidence is missing. The latter approach might preserve our theory, but it doesn't make that theory more likely to be true. Ancient myth or lost technology? This is the heart of the matter. We're forced to choose between two fundamentally different ways of understanding what we see at Dendera. Either the ancient Egyptians possessed electrical engineering knowledge that vanished without a trace, or they created sophisticated religious artwork that happens to resemble modern technology. The electrical interpretation has genuine appeal beyond simple sensationalism. When you look at the relief without preconceptions, it really does look like a technical diagram. The proportions work. The components seem functional. Engineer W. Garn proved that a device built according to these specifications actually produces light through electrical discharge. That's not speculation. That's demonstrated reality. Yet the mythological interpretation has advantages that can't be ignored. It aligns perfectly with Egyptian religious texts. It explains every symbol using documented aspects of Egyptian culture. It doesn't require us to propose advanced technology that left no other trace. It fits the broader context of how Egyptians depicted creation myths in temple art. Consider this perspective. Human brains are pattern recognition machines. We're remarkably good at seeing familiar shapes in ambiguous images. Show someone from a technological society an ancient image, and they might naturally interpret it through technological frameworks. Show the same image to someone steeped in Egyptian mythology, and they see religious symbolism. Both viewers are bringing their own context to the interpretation. The pareidolia argument cuts both ways, though. Maybe modern viewers see light bulbs where none exist, or maybe ancient viewers lacked the technological vocabulary to describe what they witnessed, so they used religious language and symbolism to document something they couldn't fully explain. Neither possibility can be dismissed outright. What frustrates researchers is how perfectly balanced this mystery remains. For every argument supporting the electrical theory, there's a counter-argument from conventional archaeology. For every symbolic interpretation, engineers point out functional details that seem too precise to be coincidental. The Dendera light occupies a strange middle ground, where both explanations seem partially convincing, yet incomplete. Perhaps the most honest answer is uncertainty. We might never know definitively what the ancient artists intended. The evidence allows multiple interpretations, each with strengths and weaknesses. The mystery persists not because we lack information, but because the information we have can be read in fundamentally different ways. Why people can't stop talking about this. The Dendera light has become something larger than an archaeological debate. It represents our complicated relationship with ancient civilizations and our assumptions about technological progress. People around the world remain captivated by the possibility that history is more mysterious and sophisticated than we've been taught. This fascination connects to a broader phenomenon in alternative archaeology. The so-called Baghdad battery, also claimed to be ancient electrical technology, follows similar patterns. Unusual artifacts that might possibly represent advanced knowledge get amplified through books, documentaries, and internet discussions. They become symbols of hidden history and lost wisdom. Why does this narrative resonate so powerfully? Perhaps because it challenges academic authority. Perhaps because it suggests ancient peoples were more capable than we credit them. Perhaps because mysteries are inherently more interesting than settled questions. The Dendera light suggests that our understanding of the past might be incomplete, or even completely wrong. Mainstream Egyptologists sometimes express frustration with how these theories spread. They've spent careers studying Egyptian culture, language, and artifacts. They've developed sophisticated methods for interpreting ancient texts and images. Yet a single compelling photograph can outweigh decades of scholarly consensus in the public imagination. But dismissing public fascination as mere ignorance misses something important. People are drawn to these mysteries because they ask fundamental questions about human capability and historical knowledge. These aren't frivolous concerns. They touch on how we understand our ancestors, how we evaluate evidence, and how we decide what counts as legitimate knowledge. The debate over the Dendera light has also produced unexpected benefits. It's driven more people to learn about ancient Egypt. Tourism to Dendera has certainly benefited. Thousands of visitors make the journey specifically to see these controversial reliefs. They stand before the ancient stone, trying to decide for themselves what they're seeing. That direct engagement with history has worth regardless of which interpretation someone ultimately accepts. However, these generic benefits are not enough for Egyptologists. They need an answer. And the only way to find one we can rely on with reasonable certainty is to put both theories to the test and decide which one seems most likely. Putting both theories to the test. So, how do we evaluate competing theories about the Dendera light? The answer lies in applying consistent standards of evidence and reasoning. Both sides need to meet the same burden of proof. For the electrical theory to gain mainstream acceptance, proponents need to produce more than functional resemblance. They need to show that ancient Egyptians possessed the prerequisite knowledge and capabilities. Where's the evidence of glass technology advanced enough for vacuum bulbs? Where are the power sources? Where's the copper infrastructure? Where are the texts describing electrical principles? Engineer demonstrations like Garn's prove that a device resembling the Dendera relief could work. They don't prove such devices actually existed in ancient Egypt. That's a crucial distinction. Possibility doesn't equal probability. We can imagine many things that could have existed, but didn't. The mythological interpretation must also withstand scrutiny. Skeptics ask legitimate questions. Why does this particular creation myth depiction look so uniquely technological compared to thousands of other religious scenes? What explains the specific proportions and layout that engineers find so compelling? Are Egyptologists too quick to default to religious explanations? The inscriptions surrounding the reliefs provide strong support for symbolic interpretation. They explicitly describe gods, creation events, and religious concepts. But could those texts themselves be using metaphorical language to describe technical processes they couldn't fully articulate? That's harder to disprove, but requires assuming the Egyptians simultaneously possessed advanced technology and lacked vocabulary to describe it clearly. Here's a productive way to think about this debate. Scientific theories succeed by making testable predictions. If ancient Egyptians had electrical lighting, we should find specific types of evidence. Chemical residues from particular manufacturing processes, tool marks consistent with precision glassworking, standardized components suggesting systematic production. The absence of these predictions weakens the electrical theory. The mythological interpretation makes different predictions. We should find similar symbolic motifs in other temples. The inscriptions should use established religious terminology. The depicted elements should have parallels in documented Egyptian iconography. These predictions are met, which strengthens the conventional interpretation. Ultimately, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. Proposing that a civilization possessed lost technology fundamentally different from everything else we know about them requires overwhelming proof. Ambiguous images, no matter how intriguing, don't meet that standard. But the door shouldn't close completely. Archaeology regularly surprises us with discoveries that challenge previous assumptions, and this mystery might be one of those cases. A mystery that won't go away. The reliefs at the Temple of Hathor continue drawing crowds from every corner of the world. People stand before these ancient carvings, trying to reconcile what their eyes see with what they think they know about history. That tension between perception and interpretation defines the Dendera mystery. What we're really witnessing here is how humans construct knowledge about the past. We have artifacts, in this case, stone reliefs. We have context, Egyptian culture, mythology, and technology. We have methods, archaeological analysis, linguistic translation, and engineering assessment. Yet, even with all these tools, consensus remains elusive. The Dendera light reminds us that history isn't a collection of settled facts. It's an ongoing conversation between evidence and interpretation. The engineers who see electrical equipment aren't crazy. They're bringing legitimate expertise to an ambiguous image. The Egyptologists who see religious symbolism aren't blindly following orthodoxy. They're applying decades of accumulated knowledge about Egyptian culture. Both groups are trying to make sense of something genuinely puzzling. Perhaps the Dendera light's greatest value lies not in having a definitive answer, but in provoking questions. It makes us think about how technology develops, how knowledge gets transmitted or lost, how we interpret visual information, and how we distinguish between possible and probable explanations. These are skills worth cultivating regardless of which interpretation proves correct. The mystery also highlights something fascinating about human creativity. Whether the ancient Egyptians were depicting electrical devices or religious symbolism, they created something powerful enough to captivate people thousands of years later. That's an achievement worth appreciating independent of technical specifications or theological meanings. The experts remain baffled by Egypt's ancient electricity lamps because the evidence stubbornly refuses to point in one clear direction. The mystery of this lost technology, or elaborate symbolism, continues to challenge our assumptions about the capabilities of ancient civilizations. What do you think you're seeing when you look at the Dendera light? Could the ancient Egyptians have possessed electrical knowledge that history forgot? Or are we projecting modern technology onto timeless myth? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.